this false prophet will arise, and he will partner with the Antichrist. This will be the duo, the end time main players, the duo that will create this beast system. And you see right here in Revelation chapter 13, verse 16, that he causes all, and that's, again, this is every person on the planet, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. Again, I'm reading from the New King James. The King James says in. I'm more apt to go with in than I am on. And that no one may buy or sell. This will be an economic system, a financial system of buying and selling, except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So don't miss it. The point here that we're telling you is that there's coming a buying, selling, and trading system that will require something in the right hand or in the forehead that will reveal your allegiance that you have pledged to the beast and his system. So some way, somehow, we've got to get there. We may not be there now, but we're taking strides to get to that direction and go in. The compass is pointing in this direction, and it's happening quickly. It's happening a lot faster than what most people think. You look at what just happened in Mexico. Mexico is pushing for they're pushing to be cashless. They're pushing for a national ID. Among their citizens, they're pushing for a national health ID, a digital identification system. They're all fully on board with this stuff, guys. Fully on board with this. And then you have to ask yourself, what other countries are going to follow behind this? Okay, so then we heard, there a while back, the penny, last year, the United States Mint pressed the last penny. In fact, let me pull this article up and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. All right, this is from USA Today. The penny is already dead. Could the nickel be next to go? Again, last year, the U.S. Mint pressed the last penny. Penny preservationists warn that the death of the 1 cent coin might see dire consequences. Coin shortages at checkout counters, confusion over how to pay bills and not ending in 0 or 5, and higher prices as greedy retailers began rounding everything up. Yet, apart from scattered penny shortages, American society appears to have survived the loss of its least valuable coin. Now, look, I want to highlight that part right there. American society appears to have survived the loss of its least valuable coin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a test run. They wanted to see what would happen in a real life scenario where the beginning of a paper currency is being stripped away. And again, an American society has survived without the penny. Now look at this. Let's scroll on down. Is the nickel next? The question is logical. President Donald Trump killed the penny because the government lost money every time it pressed one. Nickels are money losers too. In fact, nickels are, quote, bigger losers. The Mint spent $3.69 making every penny in 2024. For every nickel, the government spent 13.78 cents, a loss of nearly 9 cents per coin. Added up, and the government lost about $18 million minting pennies in 2024. On the nickel, the Mint lost $85 million. You see where this is going, right? The argument for getting rid of the nickel is that it costs more to produce, quite a bit more actually, than its face value. This is according to David Smith, who is an economist at Pepperdine University. Nickels cost more to make because they are larger than pennies and made of costlier stuff. 75% copper, 25% nickel. Pennies look like copper, but are or were actually made mostly of zinc. All right, ridding America of the penny was a no-brainer. This was according to another economist at Wake Forest University who long argued for ditching the coin. We've got rid of the penny, and I think we should have, he said, because the value of the penny was so small, it wasn't really worth our time to use it. America's growing disdain for the penny was unavoidable. Decades ago, penny could purchase a gumball. Nowadays, the average worker earns about a penny per second. If you spend more than a second with a penny, quote, you've wasted time. Now, I want you to listen to this language and this verbiage they're using, because I'm going somewhere with this, and I think most of you guys are already on track of where this is implying and where we're going. I'm going to skip down here. Many Americans regard both nickels and pennies as more of a nuisance than currency. Stop. Now, guys, you do realize that the younger generation, I'm talking about my oldest son, his generation, he's 18. And even my youngest son, who's 10, I mean, they're right behind him, right on his coattails. They're in the same generation. They look at, a lot of these look at paper currency as a nuisance. They don't want to carry coins. They don't want to carry cash. Most people don't carry cash anymore. Wake up call. They carry cards. They don't have cash. And then you go a step further than that. And then you get a large population of individuals that don't even carry cards anymore. Everything is on their phones. They make all their purchases on Apple Pay or whatever Android's got. And that's how they're paying it. Then you had companies out there like Amazon that, they tried their hand in the palm scan technology. Amazon, what was that? Amazon One, I think is what it was called. And they tried this out at some retail stores and grocery stores and chains, where you just come up and you take your hand and you scan the palm of your hand, and all of your information is tied into that, and it makes that purchase for you. Guys, again, Revelation 13 tells us that the right hand is one of the locations in which you can use to make these transactions. So again, it is the conditioning of society to accept and embrace this, okay? So the technology is here for this. And I would venture to say that the longer this goes on, the more and more people that are going to get to the point where they don't see any value of a paper currency. I don't want to carry coins, don't want to carry cash. It's either cards, or eventually, I'm going to say eventually it's going to go to implantable devices that be put in your right hand, or let's just say in another form, or, when we talk about the forehead, you got to remember, you've got these leading innovators like Meta, they're pushing for the virtual reality glasses, and that goes on your head, on your forehead. You got to remember the language that John is trying to describe. John, who wrote the book of Revelation, howbeit Revelation chapter 13, when he saw this in a vision, it was 95 AD. So John is trying to use the language and the descriptions that he had available for him in 95 AD to describe something that he saw way out into the future, into future generations, thousands of years later. So I don't, for those who would say, well, it's something injectable in your forehead, just, again, be open-minded about this, guys, because it may not be. That's why I said the 1611 King James says in the right hand or in the forehead, but your newer translations say on. So I try to be open-minded about this. I've always said that the closer we get to the fulfillment of this, the more clear it's going to become, and the more sharper it will become. That's common sense, and so we're heading in that direction. So the question is, how long will it be until we completely eliminate a paper currency? And even further, let's talk about this. What are some things, you ever thought about this? What are scenarios that would pave the way for a cashless society? Well, I took some notes on this, and I'm going to give you some scenarios that would absolutely set the stage for a complete cashless society. Now, we already know what would take the place of that. They're pushing for a digital currency, and then where does that go to? Again, these implantable devices, where all your transactions will be integrated into that device in your body to make those payments. Look, even who was it? Bill Gates came out and said that his prediction of the next smartphone, the evolution of the next smartphone, will not be like this. It will not be a device that you carry around with you, but howbeit he thinks it'll be digital tattoos, or what is it, electronic tattoos that you'll have on your body, and you'll just be able to scan this stuff. You'll be able to make transactions. You'll be able to check all of your social media and your email and everything through this type of technology. All right, so scenario number one, if we were to have a sudden banking collapse triggered by sovereign debt defaults, derivative implosions, a major institution failing, or even a major cyber attack or breach, this could introduce this. Now, I'm going to put a stake up here because I want to pull up an article, because this goes right along what they're concerned about right now. Let me show you this article right here. This is from the Daily Mail. Trump summons bank leaders over terrifying new threat to global financial system. The Trump administration has summoned America's most powerful bank chiefs to an urgent closed-door meeting over an AI model its makers warn could, look at this, bring down a blue chip company or breach national defense firewalls. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell convened the session at Treasury headquarters in Washington, D.C. This past Tuesday to address Mythos, a new model from AI giant Anthropic. Anthropic had announced Mythos the same day, revealing that the model surprised coders by hacking into the company's own networks during an internal testing. This meeting was called at short notice for, look at this, banks classified as systematically important. All right, the meeting was called at short notice for banks classified as systemically important whose stability is considered vital to the global financial system. Among those bosses summoned were Citigroup's Jane Fraser, Morgan Stanley's Ted Pick, Bank of America's Brian Moynihan, Wells Fargo's Charlie Scharf, and Goldman Sachs' David Solomon. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan was unable to attend. Only around 40 carefully vetted firms have been granted access to Mythos, which arrives off the back of Anthropic's Claude Code, the tool that sent Silicon Valley into a frenzy with its ability to, quote, generate entire programs from a single line of text. The Pentagon is already a customer, having deployed Anthropic's earlier models in the operation to seize Nicolas Maduro and during the Iran conflict. Anthropic said it had held discussions with U.S. officials ahead of the release, but Mythos and its offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. The Treasury has been contacted for comment, but the Fed declined to comment. I'm going to scroll down here and read this. The AI giant released a chilling analysis of Mythos this week as it, look at this, it admitted the new model could easily hack into hospitals, electrical grids, power plants, and other pieces of critical infrastructure. During tests, Anthropic says that Mythos found thousands of high-severity vulnerabilities, including some in every major operating system and web browser. All right, in a blog post detailing the dangerous new model, Anthropic says that, quote, AI models have reached a level of coding capability where they can surpass all but the most skilled humans at finding and exploiting software vulnerabilities. So guys, this is what I'm trying to say here is this again, we're giving you scenarios here. This could be a real scenario that brings down the entire financial system, the global financial system. Now, if this were to happen, people in droves would rush to withdraw cash But banks would impose limits and eventually they would shut down withdrawals. The government would be forced to step in and announce emergency bank holidays. They would introduce, no doubt, a digital only transaction system to, quote, stabilize liquidity. Gradual phase out of a physical currency to prevent future bank runs. In this scenario, cash would be seen as a threat to financial stability, accelerating its removal. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So this is these scenarios, guys. Then let's talk about this. The introduction of a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, during a crisis. All right. A recession, a depression, a cyber attack like this. And what this means is stimulus checks would then only be distributed via digital wallets. Tax refunds and benefits would require digital accounts. You don't have a digital account, you don't get your tax refund, you don't get your benefits, you don't get your stimulus check. Businesses, receive faster settlements using CBDC. Eventually, cash transactions are taxed, they're limited, or they're completely discouraged from being used. See, this is what I'm talking about, guys. That's why when I read these articles about we did away with the penny, it was successful, Americans tolerated it, now we're going for the nickel. What's next? The dime, the quarter. Why? Because it costs more. Again, that's their excuse is, well, we're losing money to print money. So common sense, if we're losing money to print money, let's just stop printing money altogether. Let's get rid of a completely a paper currency. Let's just get rid of it altogether and let's go to a CBDC. So this, again, what would that mean? It would mean that digital currency would become the default economic system that creates a soft transition that becomes permanent. Then let's go back to 2020, the pandemic. Under a global health crisis, and they were pushing this, guys, even back in 2020, if we were to have another global health crisis or emergency, and by the way, all of the elites and the who's who are all telling us it's not a matter of if, but when this happens, that this would absolutely push everything to be contactless. Everything. Why? Because viruses survive on paper currency. And therefore, the governments and the health agencies would all want to do away with that. So we want to make everything contactless. All businesses would refuse cash entirely, and digital payments would be framed as a, quote, public safety measure. And then over time, the temporary policy would become normalized and cash would eventually cease to operate as it once was. Now listen to this one. Here's something you don't think about. Major war or geopolitical conflicts can do this. A large-scale conflict between major powers can lead to currency manipulation, sanctions freezing physical assets, and disruption of global cash supply chains. Now, we're going to have Britt in here tomorrow, but we're already seeing the energy disruption, oil disruption. All of this is already happening. So if this thing drags on and continues, well, this could be a real scenario here. So what that will do is that will put pressure on these governments because they would want a fully traceable digital system to control capital flow. You would have instant transaction enforcements via programmable money, and then cash would become impractical in a digitally controlled wartime economy. Here's another scenario. We're talking about hyperinflation or currency collapse. This kind of goes with what we said at the beginning, but if a national currency were to rapidly lose its value, think about World War II, think about the time of Hitler, cash becomes bulky to use, too unstable to trust, authorities step in, a new digital currency would be introduced with controlled supply, expiration dates, and programmable spending to stabilize demand would be introduced, and the population would adopt to it out of necessity.